What is up, Leafs fam? This is the Leafs Convo. I am Norman James. How are you listening? On the Radio Public app? YouTube? Nicely done. Really, though, however you're listening to us, thank you so much for supporting this podcast. We are moving, shaking, building every time Mike and I collab for a discussion. Speaking of, Mike is standing by. He and I are going to talk about his latest article for HockeyBuzz.com, the results of that Auston Matthews, Mike Babcock summit in Arizona. It was a good thing for those two to get together and clear the air, right? Mike Augello is ready to go. I am, so are you. Let's do it. The Leafs Convo starts now. And here's our good friend, Mike Augello from Buffalo, New York. Hello, Michael. How are you?
Good morning, Norman. I am fine. It's a overcast and rather dreary-looking day in Buffalo, which unfortunately has been the case for a while.
It's the same here. I love exchanging weather updates with you, Mike. That's what we do on this podcast.
There you go.
So your latest for Hockey Buzz, detailing the relationship as we know it between Mike Babcock and Auston Matthews. Babs heading down to Arizona to have a powwow with his star center, and basically coming away from that meeting and saying, look, it was good. It was worthwhile, but our relationship isn't going to be rosy every day.
Yeah. And again, my opinion of this whole rift, or this whole story of the rift, is it's much ado about nothing, because through a regular season it's never always going to be smooth and great and everybody's going to be on the same page. You got people that are going to have problems with their bosses, and essentially Mike Babcock is Auston Matthews' boss. He's the head coach. He's the one who draws up the plan, and I mean, you could tell. I think that when the story came out after Game 7, they both did the best that they could to sort of avoid the, I don't like the coach. They said, we talked, everything's fine. He's a good guy, but Babcock, I think did a smart thing in going down to Arizona. Now, supposedly it was a family vacation as well, so he killed two birds with one stone. But he went down there and had a discussion with him a few weeks after the season, rather than sort of letting sleeping dogs lie and let things fester over the summer, and then maybe a bigger rift occurs when they come back for training camp. Because I mean, for all intents and purposes, Auston Matthews is the most important player on this team. I mean, there are going to be other players that are important, but he's probably going to be the future captain. He's going to be the leader of this club, and Babcock and him need to be on the same page. And in the interview with Darren Drager yesterday, he admitted, it's not going to be, flowers and candy every day. They're competitive guys. They both want the same goal, but they have different ideas of how to get there. But Babcock is the head coach, and basically, you're going to have to go with what he wants, because I don't think he's going to sort of lower his or change his the course of action based on the opinion of his star player, who's 20 years old.
This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James in London, Ontario. My partner in crime, Mike Augello in Buffalo, New York. We know reaction filters through social media, Mike. It's just we criticize it, we laud it, but it's just there. That's how we push our product. That's how we consume information. So reaction is there, and you'll have factions. One side saying, "Well, we're down with whatever Mike Babcock sells us because he's the leader. We love him." And then you have another faction that looks at Mike Babcock as if he represents a bit of an old school way of thinking. He's gruff, he's tough, he's set in his ways. And that's fine. And you may dislike the way he handled some of the strategies and the players in that 7-game loss to Boston. However, is there no such thing as reconciliation anymore? If you don't like the way Mike Babcock handled his star center in Auston Matthews, and he goes down to Arizona to try to clear the air, and perhaps he apologized, perhaps he set the record straight, just wanted to get on the same page, isn't that enough for you? Isn't that fine? Like, the head coach is doing he's looking inward, he's making the attempt, he's reaching out, he's trying to reconcile. What's wrong with that?
No, nothing. I think it was smart for him to do so. I think that he needs Auston Matthews needs Mike Babcock, and Mike Babcock needs Auston Matthews, and they both have the same goal. And I think right now the only difference is philosophically, how do you best reach that goal? And that's where, like, I use, for example, the playing of him and Mitch Marner together. Now, clearly, Babcock doesn't want to do that. He wants to have, Marner controls the puck. So does Matthews. They want the puck, and having two guys on a line that do the same thing, he believes is sort of detrimental. But clearly, Matthews and Marner want to play together. I think, like against Boston, you had Pasternak, Marchand, and Bergeron all on the same line, and how dynamic and how effective that line was. But that's philosophical. You see Matthews saying, well, I'd like to play with him. He's a great player, blah, blah, blah. They played together for, I think, 3 or 4 games early in the season, and then they were quickly broken up. And I think Marner moved to the 4th line after that, when this is before he started to really get on track. And at the end of the year, he was asked about that, and Babcock says, well, you guys, meaning the media, want Marner and Matthews to play together. I want to win. So he clearly believes that Matthews and Marner playing together is not detrimental, but it's not the best thing. And that may be part of the philosophical difference. That is not like the coach hates the player or the player hates the coach. So I think it's much ado about nothing, really.
Has Auston Matthews generated enough pedigree, enough of a profile, enough of a repertoire to go to Mike Babcock and say, here's how I want the lines to shape out, and I'm basically dictating to you what I want, so you may not do it, but you're going to piss me off. Does Auston Matthews have enough credibility at this point to go into the coach's office and make any sort of demands, if he has?
Well, I mean, from what Babcock said yesterday in the interview with Drager, I think he's thinking, like, basically he said a 28-year-old player who's established, he would, cater or listen to them more. He says this is a young club and he's a 20-year-old. So there's still some molding and still some, I don't think Mike Babcock is ever going to yield completely to the wants and desires of a 20-year-old. That's what I think, what I gather from his commentary. I might be off on that, but that's what I think. And, I think it's beneficial for Auston Matthews. I mean, the goal for both of them is for Auston Matthews to be the best player he can be. He wants to be, the best two-way player in hockey, as Babcock said. Babcock obviously wants access to a player like that. So, I mean, their goals are the same, but if you're asking me who has a better idea of what makes the best two-way player, a 20-year-old in Auston Matthews or Babcock, I would say Babcock. He's coached players like that before, so he knows.
This story, you mentioned that it could be much ado about nothing. And again, this is the byproduct of a 7-game loss to the Bruins. Had the Leafs gone through and at least played Tampa in the second round, the narrative may have been different as a fallout, but this is what we're dealing with. And as much as there is this impression that Mike Babcock is set in his ways and is immovable on philosophy, perhaps Auston Matthews might be generating a bit of a reputation, fair or unfair, truthful or untruthful, right or wrong, that he might be coming off as a bit of a, superstar, a not a spoiled brat, but a guy who, he's a prima donna. And I'm not saying that's fair in the same way that there's criticism of Mike Babcock lodged at him every single day that's unfair. But this is what we're dealing with right now. And again, until we get back to playing, until there's new news, until there's something else for us to sink our teeth into, I mean, we're going to speculate and we're going to bloviate over a lot of these circumstances. And that's where we're at here. So, what happens if the Leafs sign John Tavares and now we have another franchise type center in the mix? And what if he's on the first line and Auston Matthews is bumped down to the second line? You know what I'm getting at here, Mike? I mean, he's young, he's impressionable, he's still learning his way. I just hope that the path is one of a little more stoicism than one of petulance.
And I've never picked up on that, prima donna type of character when it comes to Auston Matthews. I mean, I was at the Air Canada Center for almost every game this year and every playoff game, and in many scrums with Auston Matthews, and never encountered anything other than someone who was a professional, who was not burdened by his ego. I mean, I think he's pretty down to earth, and I think really he wants to be, the best player in the NBA. A drive there that he wants to be the best player in the league, and that's a great thing for Leaf fans, because some players are content to rely on their skills, and he's got ample skills, but there is a fire burning in that kid to be the best, and that's a positive thing. But it's all a question of, this may be a little bit of growing pains, and he thinks that he can burden more of or handle more of the burden. I mean, according to Babcock, in Game 7 when they were losing in the third period, Matthews wanted to be relied on more, wanted to be out there double shift or whatever, just to get the team going and get them over the hump. And, that was, I guess that did not coincide with the plans of Mike Babcock or what he wanted to do. So there was a little friction there, but, again, it's like, in a competitive situation, that's going to happen. There's going to be disagreement.
Well, Mike Babcock, ultra successful in Detroit, winning a Stanley Cup. How many President's trophies did they win? How many 100-point seasons did they have? I mean, he was there for when this team, really ramped up that quarter-century-long playoff streak. And for as many star players as Mike Babcock had on the Red Wings, it was still done by committee. Everybody knew their role. There was a humility on that team that seemed to be passed from one player to the next, whether it was a Pavel Datsyuk or a Henrik Zetterberg or a Darren Helm. It was a by committee sort of ideology that obviously worked successfully. And Mike Babcock knows that's his game plan. That's his modus operandi. He brings it to Toronto, and that's exactly what he wants. It's not a structure where you have an Alex Ovechkin eating up ice time, taking all the shots, and he's super intense and super incredible and super productive. But there's a disparity between him and that second tier, third tier group of players. So I think that that's going to be a challenge for Auston Matthews, wanting to do more, knowing he can do more, feeling he can do more, and being told, well, you know what, you're just going to get what you get, because the concept here is to have it done by committee. You're part of the plan. You're better than most of your teammates, but you're going to do your fair share, and your teammates are going to have to take on the rest.
And one of the things that Babcock said in the interview that I thought was interesting, and I think will be a sort of a window into what happens over the summer, is that he realizes and reflects on the teams that are currently still in the playoffs and the team that they lost to in the Bruins, and says, well, they were all very deep teams. And when he's talking about the Leafs, he's clearly intimating that the depth, they may have organizational depth, but they don't have depth at the level of some of the teams that are currently in the playoffs. And that's something that Kyle Dubas is going to have to address. And obviously I think that means depth that Mike Babcock can use, and that doesn't mean players. And that's where that whole dynamic of, Dubas's direction and Babcock's direction, they have to be one and the same, because if it's not players that Babcock will use in key situations, then it doesn't help the depth of the organization, because he's not going to use players that he doesn't like.
Well, what was your saying, Mike? It's not all chocolates and roses. What was the saying you?
Yeah, no, not all roses and roses and candy. Yeah.
It's not all roses and candy anymore, Mike. This is no longer the little team that could. This is a team with high expectations on it. What, 105-point season in the regular season? There was an expectation amongst several that the Leafs would get past Boston. So going into the next season, there are going to be standards set. 100+ point campaign. You got to get into that second, third round. So the pressure's ramping up, not just for Auston Matthews, but the head coach too. And we talked about Mike Babcock learning on the job here. I mean, if he's established and feels that he's so staunch in his ways that it's his way or the highway, then this could have a bad ending for him here, whether they win a cup or not. if you are at the top of your game and you are amongst the elite and you are someone who is an influencer in this game, then you have to influence yourself with new ideas and new concepts. And sometimes you're confronted with these situations where your old strategies employed would work, but in this circumstance, you have different personnel, different people, different personalities. You're going to have to make changes. So I'm hoping Mike Babcock comes back to, preseason and at the exhibition training camp, and he's learned things too, and he's evolved as well.
Well, I think that let's just say this: the inflexibility of Babcock, I think, has been overemphasized by some, because if he was completely inflexible, then he would not have moved Leo Komarov to the fourth line. He would have not called up Andreas Janssen in the last 3 weeks of the regular season. He wouldn't have installed Travis Dermott in January. I mean, there were changes that were made that definitely reflected somebody who was open to the fact that, there were limitations with some of the players. Now, the thing is, I think there still is that belief on the part of Babcock in the guys that he trusts. And that's why I'm saying, like, Roman Polak is going to be the sixth defenseman, was going to be the sixth defenseman on this team in the second half, no matter what. And he proved to be very good at that role. And that, I know that's probably flying in the face of the analytics crowd who don't like Roman Polak. Now, the question will be this summer with Kyle Dubas in control is, will he get his toys? Will they re-sign, Leo Komarov to a 1-year contract, or will they bring back Roman Polak because Babcock clearly wants those players and then can still use them? Or will Dubas say, okay, no, you're going to have to use Justin Hall, or you're going to have to use Timothy Liljegren or whatever. And that's where potential conflict could be if Babcock doesn't think that they're ready. But I think that's where, there'll have to be some common ground decided on between the general manager and the head coach.
This is the Leafs Conversation. Norman James with Mike Augello. Is Roman Polak going to be the stalwart defenseman on a 16-win run to a Stanley Cup championship, or is he essentially a placeholder serving at the pleasure of the head coach until someone else comes along? There's going to be that confrontation, not just between Dubas and Babcock, but within himself, where he's going to have to reconcile with the fact that it's time to move away from these players who've done great work within a certain time frame, but to elevate the team, it might make more sense to either bring in an FA, make that trade, and bring someone else in to take that spot, or maybe elevate a player that management believes needs to have more time at the NHL level. Like, come on, like Roman Polak, he might be a guy you trust, but is in your mind, does Mike Babcock envision him as one of the key pieces in a championship run?
I have to say I'm a Roman Polak fan because I'm a fan of his type of game. And if you look at some of the teams, in the playoffs right now, I mean, Brooks Orpik is a Roman Polak type player. He's almost a zero offensively, but he's a defensive defenseman. He's tough. He makes players pay to go into the defensive zone. And really, Polak was not the problem in the playoffs. He was tough. He was hitting Bruins players. He was not a liability. The liability was Jake Gardiner. The liability was Nikita Zaitsev, guys who were playing in the top four. So if you can bring back Roman Polak for $1.5 million to $2 million on a 1-year contract, that's not your problem. The problem is the guys who play 25, 26 minutes a night.
Well, I'm saying, though, I mean, you're not going to supplant Jake Gardiner with a prospect at the AHL level who is not a blue chipper, but somebody you think could assimilate with the overall planet with the Maple Leafs. A guy like Roman Polak, considering his age and considering his limited tools, although his tools within that quadrant are pretty valuable and productive. However, he is going to be the one who loses his job over, say, a Jake Gardiner or Nikita Zaitsev, considering they're making more money. I mean, they might be considered more of a part of the future plan for the defense corps. So again, I have no issue with Roman Polak. I mean, he plays his game. It's a quiet game. And, a lot of times the defensemen you never hear of, or you never hear from. You don't hear their name mentioned very much, but they're out there, logging tons of minutes. They're the ones who, they're the ones who are quietly going about their business. And Roman Polak did a pretty nice job in the playoffs, although you're going to have a lot of people out there saying it was Roman Polak's fault, not Jake Gardner's fault. And that's why we have the Leafs conversation, so we can get it all out there, air out our differences. And at the end of the day, sometimes we just don't make any sort of appreciable change to the discussion, but we still have it anyway. This is the Leafs Convo. Norman James with Mike Augello. Just a few more minutes. Mike, the Marlies still waiting to play the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. Wow, are they gonna spook the Toronto AHLers on Saturday and Sunday, or do you feel like if Toronto plays its game, it's off to the Calder Cup final?
Well, I expect the first game to be a little bit rusty because the Marlies will have been off for 11 days, and even though the Phantoms definitely needed the rest, they will be off for 7 days because they clinched their series on Saturday. I mean, the one thing, and talking to Philadelphia Flyer reporter friends of mine who covered or know that team pretty well, they lost a couple defensemen in Travis Sanheim, who played with the Flyers this year, and Sam Moran. So, I don't know if they'll be back for the beginning of that series, but the Marlies will be well rested and completely healthy, and the Phantoms will be rested, but I don't know about completely healthy. So to me, that gives the Marlies an advantage. But as we've learned in series in the NHL and the AHL, that home ice advantage really doesn't matter sometimes. And I mean, even though the Marlies are, I believe, 5-0 at home right now, it's very, very possible. Lehigh Valley is a team that took 5 overtimes to win a road game. So, and Alex Lyon, their goaltender, has played great. So it's going to be a tough series for them. But I still think the Marlies are the better team.
Well, the way they're composed, what they accomplished in the regular season, the fact they've won 5 in a row, this team should be the favorite to win the Calder Cup. And heck, why not just do it? I mean, we've seen so many teams in position to achieve that ultimate goal and fail, because that's sports. But why not be in position to achieve that ultimate goal and actually achieve it? Yeah. Mike, real quick, for those who are listening to the podcast and are interested in our discussions about Auston Matthews, Mike Babcock, John Tavares speculation, stuff related mainly to the Maple Leafs, why should they pay attention to what's going on with the Marlies?
Well, I mean, you look at the team last year and this year. The young insurgents of guys like Connor Brown, Zach Hyman, all those young forwards, William Nylander to an extent, they all came from the Marlies. That team that made the conference final a couple years ago. The core group of that team is the group that made their difference as rookies the following October with the Leafs. So, I mean, I think that there are at least 3, maybe 4 players on the Marlies that are going to be competing for a job at training camp. I mean, I think Dermott and I think Johnson are going to be Leafs next year, especially with the exodus of Van Riemsdyk and Komarov and a couple others. I think there's a decent chance that a guy like Carl Grundstrom, who was their second round pick a couple years ago, who's played great in the AHL after playing in the Swedish league the last couple of years, he, to me, he'll be a 20-year-old kid, I believe, when they enter training camp, and he's feisty and he's Leo, but I think a lot faster and I think with more offensive gifts. So there was 3 or 4, and you never know, with Kyle Dubas taking control, maybe more of those Marlies that could step up to the NHL. And they sort of need those young guys to keep coming through the pipeline, because those are entry-level contracts you're paying less than $1 million to for 2 or 3 years, and that enables you to go out in free agency and spend the money on a defenseman or on a John Tavares. So I think what happens with the Marlies is very important.
Well, they're not just there to fill out roster spots. They're not just people you're employing to play a game at the minor league level. They're in that situation to season and prepare for graduation to the next level. And part of the experience that is invaluable and clearly goes a long way to helping develop players is being on a successful team, potentially winning a championship. And again, the Marlies are in position to win it all. They're looking good. why not go ahead and do it? Alex Ovechkin and the Capitals up 2-0 on the Tampa Bay Lightning in the Eastern Conference Final. Are you surprised by that? We'll make it quick here. Are you surprised by that? And do you think, quietly, maybe this is the Capitals' opportunity to get to the final? And I don't know, perhaps Alex Ovechkin can finally break that Stanley Cup drought that people are starting to talk about?
Well, full disclosure, I picked Tampa in this series, so I'm a little bit stunned. And the funny thing is that right now, in talking about this series before it began, a lot of people who picked Washington expected Braden Holtby to sort of stand on his head, and that would be the way that Washington would win. I think he's been rather pedestrian. I mean, I think right now the reason Tampa is losing is because Andrei Vasilevsky can't stop a beach ball. He's been terrible, especially giving up goals in the last 10 seconds in Game 1 and Game 2, which are killers. But they're not. But Tampa Bay is not playing up to the level that I thought that they were when the level that they were playing against Boston, and I'm a little surprised. But just like Washington, who lost the first 2 games at home to Columbus and then came back and won 4 straight, I'm not ready to sign off on Tampa Bay being out. So I think there's a chance they come back, but obviously Washington has the advantage right now, the way that they're playing and up 2-0.
What a strange journey that would be for Tampa if they actually made the Stanley Cup final, to lose the first 2 at home and then find their game and somehow get it done over 7, because I'd have a feeling if they're going to win the series, they'd have to go 7. But again, the Capitals, come on, Ovechkin, you're one of the purest goal scorers ever. I mean, the guy's, whether you like him, his personality or not, that guy has been it's been a blessing for us to watch him perform over this era. I mean, he's been fantastic. Here's an opportunity for him to take over. I mean, he has an opportunity, and we'll see if the Capitals in this terrific position can actually, put their foot on the throat of the Tampa Bay Lightning tonight with an opportunity to go up 3-0. Vegas Jets look great. That series tied at 1. So much to cover, Mike. You do it for Sporting News, you do it for Hockey Buzz, and of course the Leafs Convo. If you have anything else to add, go for it now, because we're about to shut it down.
Just in the next couple of days, I'll be doing my evaluations of individual players on Hockey Buzz. I know that I caught a little bit of heat from some Leaf fans who thought that my grade of B+ for Frederik Andersen for the year was low. And I mean, I had to point out that he had a bad first month. He was great for most of the rest of the season, but he tailed off at the end of the year, probably because of overuse. And then in the playoffs, he was either great or he was not so great. So I think B+ was a fairly accurate grade, and I'm sure that people will disagree with some of the grades that I have for some other players in the next few days.
Didn't you give Alan Bester a B+ 30 years ago?
Yeah, but that was before the Sergio Momesso overtime goal.
Have a good one, Mike.
Thanks, Norman.
Have you heard TLC Daily yet? It's new stuff, more Leafs content for you. Hear it on our Radio Public app. You can listen to it and watch it on our YouTube page. While you're there, please like and subscribe to that darn thing. It means a lot to us. We're picking up subscribers by the hour. The Leafs conversation is out of control. Nothing's going to stop us. You're a part of it. It means so much to us. Contact me through social media at I Am Sports Heart, at the Leafs Convo. You can also reach out to Mike Augello at Mike in Buffalo. Again, thank you so much for listening to this podcast. We have so much more in store. For now, I am out.